Want to thank everyone for joining us for the dream session of appreciative inquiry and visuals. And so, love to talk about what we're going to cover today. I'm excited about this session. This is the session where you still get to do the balcony and the dance floor, but you get to sit back and experience this a little bit, probably closer to the end of the session. But here hopefully you've got your thinking caps on and you're excited. So in this 4-session course, we're here to learn practical, applicable ways to integrate appreciative inquiry into visuals for meeting design. And today's session is to experience some visual templates. So these are templates that I've already created that you are welcome to use just as they are. Customize them for your client just to help you get ideas about how visuals and appreciative inquiry come together and part of that 5D process. So how are we going to do that? Oops, we've already done appreciative imagery. That was yesterday. I'm going to show you some dream templates. We're going to experience a needs assessment template that's based in appreciative resilience. And that's one you're just going to experience. And then we'll do some wrap up and next steps. And tomorrow is going to be about design. So this is where you really need to make sure that you've looked over the handouts, written up maybe a draft purpose statement. And if you have an agenda or an upcoming project where you'd like to visualize something that also that's AI supported, or just want some visuals, bring those tomorrow. I certainly have plenty to share with you, but we'll have some opportunity to co-create some agenda items using visuals. And then so hopefully today you leave inspired to dream and include some of these visuals or customize them for your work. So we're just going to dive right in. Now, this is a really popular visual that I think yesterday I may have mentioned. If you're ever with a client and you want to say something like, if you were queen or king for the day, or if you had a magic wand, what would you like to see happen? And this is, and I put the link in the chat so that you can go and download this. This is by Christina Merkley. It's called Wouldn't It Be Nice If? And it just starts out, wouldn't it be nice if? And people can start saying things that would be nice. And you can put that into a particular um, context. So if you're saying that we're going to be hiring, twice as many people that are in the company in the next year, and we want to make sure that we sustain our culture. Wouldn't it be nice if? What are some of the things that we'd like to keep, or what are some of the things that we'd like to have with all of these new people and energy? That's just one example. But the visual itself is just a blank page with some visual on it, and you'll notice that there's little groupings of lines. And this is where you as the facilitator would ask the question and people would start talking and you could just write it down. So you don't have to draw anything. The template's already there. You can just start writing these things down. Now, I do want to say that I asked Christina for this information and she said, absolutely, that I can share it and you are welcome to use it in your work. She does say that this is inspired by Abraham Hicks, who does a lot of law of attraction work. So just be aware that either you or some of your clients may or may not be open to law of attraction work, but just know that that's where it comes from. And if you haven't heard of Christina Merkley, she teaches a fundamentals course that really helps people from the very start, or even if you've had some experience, to get visuals into your repertoire. She was one of my first teachers, and I took her fundamentals class to begin, and I probably have taken every single one of the classes that she's offered over the last 12 years. So I highly recommend her. She's got a wonderful blog post full of instructional videos and maps and things like that you can use. Have either of you heard of Christina Merkley or worked with her maps? Okay, so you're familiar with her. Great. So this is just one of those. And it's, again, this really to me says the dream state. Wouldn't it be nice if here's where if no resources, time, or whatever was in the way, what could we have? And in the dream state of appreciative inquiry, we want to build a vision. And I'm actually going to show you how to take all that dreaming and make it into practical use pretty quickly, because I'm a pretty practical person, but I too understand the value of dreaming. So here's a very, very simple visual. Again, I'll give you the PowerPoint if you want to use the PowerPoint. You can also probably pretty easily draw this because yesterday we drew some clouds. And you can certainly trace something like this too if you don't feel comfortable drawing, or make your own. And the idea here is really about dreaming as a group. And so now here's where we can do some clustering and some ideating. And you might want to have some appreciative agreements around this. This is really about brainstorming in a way, is to say, all ideas are valid. We can throw as many up here, maybe even say it's about quality and quantity. So it's okay if some of them don't get chosen. And I've thrown a couple of questions here, but this is such a universal visual that you could ask just about any question that you want or make it really customized for your client. So one of the things that I would like you to think about is one or two of your current clients, and that second question, what aspirations do they have? What might be some of their goals, or what's one of the things that they want to accomplish? And I'd love for you to either annotate on this page just as it is, or you can type it in the chat. And just what are some of the aspirations or goals? What are some of the things that they want to accomplish that you're kind of being tasked for? This kind of gives me an idea of what you're working on. And then I'm going to show you how we're going to distill those down and prioritize them. But for now, just dream a bit. What are some of the aspirations that your clients have? Great. These are all great. And you can see how quickly and easily, if you had a room full of people, how this could fill up quickly. And then people can either begin to cluster either themselves, or you can help them. Here I'm seeing, okay, support recovery. Okay, we'll use these 6 for now. So can someone say more about support recovery? What does that mean to you or for your client?
Uh, it means empowering people and seeing them as subjects.
Mm-hmm.
And to, oh, now my English is failing me.
That's okay. That's okay. This gives us an idea. And as you were talking, I was thinking, well, support recovery could also be very close to supporting people in a constructive way to find and keep a job. Would you say that those are similar?
They are connected, but support recovery is like bigger because,
Right.
yeah.
Good. Good. So that might be, but they could be connected. They're not completely different.
No.
When I look at co-creative, inclusive cultures and treating people well, they could possibly go together, even though they're not the same way, the same thing. Thrive and work in life, that feels a little bit different, but could be similar to live in alignment with values. But here's an example of how you might say, okay, what else could be clustered? What else kind of goes together? And the group can then decide so that it becomes their visual, because it's not something you're pushing at them as a facilitator. You're harvesting information and then helping them make those connections. So this is great. And at some point, you'll have people in the room that want to keep dreaming, and then other people that are like, hold on, we got to do something with this. Like, okay, this is great, wonderful exercise. Maybe it took 20 minutes or so, and they're ready to move on, right? You're always going to have a few people in the room that are like, okay, great. So what? Now what? So I'm going to clear this out, and I've saved this for us for later. And then the next thing, something you can say, okay, if they're ready to do the next step, then what you can say is, all right, let's distill this down. So let's distill it down to the essence or to prioritize. So during a discovery meeting, clients will give you all kinds of ideas, or they'll start putting a lot of things at you. And yesterday I showed you how I use the 5D process to sort some of the things that they're saying to learning about them and perhaps what their dream is. Well, sometimes it can be a lot of ideas, especially with the exercise that we just did. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll draw a funnel and I'll have all of those ideas, and I will then decide what's together with them, what's the criteria, and then so that way we can prioritize. So let me show you what I mean by that and actually draw for you, so that you can then perhaps do this for your client. And let's see, that's showing a different camera that I'm going to actually show you later. Let me show you my desktop camera. Here we go. It's coming in. There we go. All right. So I've got a blank piece of paper here, and I've written down all of the things that you just did. So say, for instance, each one of you had sticky notes and we weren't working digitally. And here we are with the actual things, oops, that you wrote. And so we want to be able to see those. And we did a little bit of clustering, but clustering can be important to kind of say, okay, where are some of the themes? But also, we want to make sure we see everything and put that in relationship to being distilled down. So if these are all my ideas, and if I were to draw a funnel where things get distilled down, then I also have to think about, okay, which of these things are we going to focus energy on? Now, you could give everyone a dot, either digitally or an actual physical sticker, and say, vote on the ones that you want. And it might just be that simple. But if someone says, hold on a second, what's the criteria for our decision making? Then you can decide, okay, let's talk about what those criteria points are. And that's going to help us make a decision. And so I'll throw a few out there, but maybe you have some too. One of them could be, does this activity align with our mission? Many times organizations will have an opportunity to do a project, but they get mission creep or scope creep, right? And now it's not a part of their mission, but they really want to do it. So do they need to change their mission? Well, that's a lot of work to get everybody on board to do that. But asking yourself, does this align with our mission? What are some other criteria that we might choose to help us make a decision of which of these great ideas are we going to focus our energy on?
What does it cost?
Yes, so cost or expense. Great. What else? What else comes up? This can come from your own
Yeah.
experience or what your clients, what they normally think about too.
This might be similar to mission.
Mhm.
But to me, it's like, do we have a clear purpose for this? Like, is it like,
Yeah.
do we just like it? Or like, are we just dreaming? And like, there's, like you said, some people like are really good at dreaming. So they're going to come up with all sorts of ideas. But like, do they have a
Right.
purpose or they're just brainstorming?
Yeah, exactly. Is it a clear purpose? You might also say, is it relevant? Right?
Yeah.
Some of the things that I do as a facilitator, especially when I'm working online and I have a really big group of people and a lot of them might be new to me, is I will say to them, if you have a question, you can put it in the chat because I'll see it and then I can answer it when I want. Or I'll say, if you have timely, relevant questions. How often in a meeting are you in a group and then someone asks some question that's like, from left field? And it especially happens in the dream state because we're thinking of all the possibilities, right? And so I'll say, is this idea relevant? Is it timely? And will it bring, what is the value that it's going to bring. And sometimes just saying, when you get to that distillation phase, okay, we're done brainstorming now. Now we need to think about the projects that are timely, relevant, and will bring value. And those three things could just be it for your decision making. We don't have to choose all of these different criteria. I just wanted to give you some examples. Something that's close to cost and experience is also, what is your ROI or return on investment? So this might not cost a lot, but it might not also bring us much. Or it could be the other way around. You could say, you know what, this is going to cost too much for us to be able to do. And so having that, knowing, okay, the cost and expense is going to be really important, but let's make sure that that's also related to value. And what's that return on investment that we're going to get from that cost or expense? Excellent. Another one that's not up here yet is values. Does this align with our organizational values? And maybe that's a great question to ask, because maybe we haven't talked about our values, or maybe we have values, but they're on our website and nobody really knows them. Are we operationalizing them? And that might be a reason to do one of these things, because you know what? Not only does it align with our values, but we don't always practice our values. So could something like co-create inclusive cultures help us with our values? Absolutely. That's a great way to do that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I would say that like one value that I would separate out is equity. It's like, is this idea equitable?
Yes, absolutely. That's excellent. And that could be something that could be like, of all of our values, this is the one we're going to focus on. Yeah, that's excellent. Any other criteria that you can think of?
Time.
Time. So is that also part of the investment too? Like how much time it's going to take?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. And this list can go on and on. However, what you might find is you might want to make it really simple for your client and choose 1 to 5. I like 3 because it's an easy one to remember. But if you have all of these things, then sometimes you're like, oh, we're kind of giving up, or we're compromising not being able to do a project. And if you say, okay, some of these things really go through the funnel well and some don't, at least you go into it being informed. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's go ahead and take this co-creative inclusive cultures. If this were to make its way through the funnel, what are some of the things that it checks the box? If you were to say co-creative inclusive cultures, does it align with our mission?
So, I mean, I would say that given that we haven't defined any of these things.
Right, exactly.
I would say that it's probably like definitely mission, clear purpose, and it's relevant, it's timely given the times, and there's
Mhm.
tons of research that talk about monetary value.
Okay,
So I would
great.
say that yes, there's values in terms of equity. There is also research about like that it is more costly to be more inclusive. I mean, sorry, that is more
Right.
cost efficient to be. Although there might be there might be there might be a feeling that there's an upfront cost, but the research says
Right.
that it is more economical, so there is a good return on investment, and it will take time.
That's right.
But anything that you want to invest into will take time.
Right. And it probably has a really excellent ROI. So what do all these
Yeah.
little marks mean? So
Mhm.
my lines are going to be like, yep, it does that, it does that, it does that. Oh, wait, there's a couple of things here. It's going to take longer, it's going to cost some money, but it's really going to check that box. So you can decide, what kind of icons you want to use. You could just use lines to say, yeah, it checks a lot of these boxes, and we know what it's going to take, so we're willing to do it. right?
Mhm.
That type of thing. So we're just going through, and you might say, you know what? If it's 3 out of 5, that's good enough. That's all we needed. We don't need it to check every single box. So let's look at support people in a constructive way to find and keep their work. Now, mission, that could be part of the mission, or it could just be a subset of what we do here, or it could be something we do for our culture. So it may not really cover mission, but is it relevant, timely, and valuable? Probably, if you're having an issue with people not keeping their jobs or not feeling supported in their jobs. So yeah, sure, it covers that. Does it help with equity? If it's done with an equitable approach, right? Depends on how it's designed. You could design it so only certain people keep their jobs, or you can design it so that it is truly equitable. And so having that discussion, you decide who's going to help determine how that's delivered. Who's going to do that? And the return on investment, oh, we know that that is just a great big check mark, because that's going to be time well spent with people. And we could probably say that about treating people well. And you talked about support recovery. So that could be part of the way. Treating people well could be part of the way that we support people in constructive way to keep their job. But support recovery is something really specific, right? It's a little bit more involved, or it's an umbrella over these things. So say more about support recovery. Does that meet the criteria? Would it make it through the funnel?
Well, it does. It works with values and acuity, and it makes like services work, health services work better. Like
Mhm.
so there is a return on investment.
Right?
It takes more time,
Mhm.
but there is a clear purpose, and it's
Yeah.
relevant. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So this could be a whole bunch of pluses or check marks saying, yeah, we absolutely have to do this. And these two pieces down here might be part of the way we do this. So these can kind of be clustered together a bit, I think. And I think it's important in an equitable situation when you are working with a group and making sure that all ideas do get heard, all ideas do get reflected on, that we take each one of these through, that we don't forget them, right? Because we don't want to, if we have hundreds of these, then maybe people work in groups to determine this. But really, to create, let's go through the rest of these. So thrive in work and life. May not be part of our mission. It may be relevant, timely, and valuable for sure. Does it align with our values? Maybe. Is there a return on the investment? Yeah, but it might not be really measurable. Like, how do we measure something like this?
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah, I think like with this one, for example, I'm thinking about like coaching,
Mm-hmm.
and like organizational coaching. And so how does coaching support people thriving at work? But because you are a holistic person, whatever changes you do,
Right.
it's going to have like an effect in all of your persona, not just at work.
Yeah.
So technically, it could be considered expensive depending on how
Right.
you look
Right.
at it, but
Right.
there's a return on investment
Exactly.
because the person hopefully will like be doing the work so that they could thrive in that environment, or they
Mm-hmm.
will leave, right? And so like if they are not in alignment with the organization, then them leaving will also be beneficial for the organization.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if it depends. So like if you do, I don't know, like 2-3 months of coaching, like that might be a lot of time for some people. That might not be a lot of time for others. So that will
Right.
be like that we will have to define things. But yeah.
Yeah. So this is really excellent. This is where we're going from our dream state into now we're starting to actually have discussions around what's this going to look like? What's the design going to be? Right. And so again, I didn't give you a whole lot of time to dream. We're kind of on the balcony now. I didn't give you a whole lot of time to dream. But there are going to be people in the room that don't want to dream. They want to talk about it more. And so now we can start to carry out or start to define that vision a little bit. And my pen leaked on me. And I also realized that this isn't a really good color on orange. So we've learned now that I probably should have used a different color. So thriving in work and life, we definitely see the value. I mean, we're all thinking in the same direction. Living in alignment with values, that definitely aligns with the values. Living doesn't say working, it says living. So this is again, really treating that whole person, right? Treating that person well, treating people in a way that people come first. And then this one isn't like any of the others, creating a product that is scalable. This is like, we definitely want to make money with a product. Is the product mission focused? Sure. Does it have a clear purpose? Well, what product are we talking about? It sounds like we need to have a conversation around that. Is it about values and equity? Depends on how we create the product. Is it sustainable? Is it equitable? Is it going to cost some money? Sure, it's going to take some time and money to develop, but the return on investment really comes with that scalable piece. So this again is one way to take all of those ideas and get the group to a point where we say, let's come up with some criteria. What's important to us? And it might be that the people that are in the room may not be the decision makers. So this visual can be really helpful for going back to the decision makers and showing them, here's the conversation we had. Here's the criteria we came up with. What are we missing? What else do we need? And so this is where the visual can come back and show it's an actual artifact that the group can say, this is the work that we did. This is the conversation we have. And a lot of times leaders don't go to every single meeting. We know that. So being able to use visuals to report up or report out or report down can bring a lot of value when you say, what was that conversation about? What made you decide that? Right?
I
And
have a
so,
question.
yes.
So when you're showing this to like people who are not part of it, like do you save all of this and you kind of replicate like the movements that you were doing, or like do you animate this? Like how do you actually show it?
It can be lots of different ways. You could say, this is what I would suggest is if you had a bunch of sticky notes, because there's lots of different ways you could do it. You could actually show the picture of all the sticky notes at the top. And then you have your criteria that you came up with. And then at the bottom, you can have your no kidding prioritization. Like, here's what we think should be the priority of all of these things. We discussed all of these things. They made it through here. Maybe you have a pile that didn't make it and say, here's the other ideas if you want to see them. Chances are they don't have time for it. They don't want to. And then you say, what's the number one thing we want to work on? The number two thing we want to work on? And the number three thing we can work on. And again, this is still dreaming. You haven't really committed to anything yet. You're just having the discussion. It might be that someone else has to make the decision, but you're saying, here's what we recommend. And you can either take these actual things and put them down here so that they can see them, or you can just write them in. And when you make it, it depends on how you're reporting. Can it look really sloppy like this? Like, is the person like, we don't want you to spend any more time on this. We just want the information. Or are we going to send this out to the rest of the organization and we want them to see what we did, but we want it to look a little bit more polished. Like we got a little bit together, right? So yeah, I have in some cases, if I have an idea and I want to share it with someone and I want them to kind of get the audio because I know that they're good listeners, I will make a video and say, here's how we did this. Here was our process. But in most cases, these turn out to be a visual that gets put into a presentation like a PowerPoint. And so if you can just quickly draw it back up and make it look a little nicer with a little bit nicer lettering or a little bit nicer drawing or something, then you can still take a picture of that and throw it in a PowerPoint. It really depends on your organization, their culture, and what they feel is acceptable, right? And maybe even ask the group, how do you want to present this back so that the client, so that the decision makers will say yes. Like, here's where you get to use your influence. Who's going to deliver this? Is it just on a piece of paper, or is someone actually going to have a conversation with the leader? And what tool do they need? Do they need the funnel and all of the ideas, or do they just need the funnel, the criteria, and the top 3 things they recommend? Those are all, these are great questions.
And one more question. Thank you. That was super helpful.
Yeah.
And in terms of the criteria, do you come up with the criteria before you do this exercise? Do you come up with it during the exercise? Like, what's that process like?
That's excellent. I say in the dream phase, if this is everybody's voices being heard, I let the group do it. If I'm not doing this in the dream phase, but I'm doing this later on in a bigger meeting, and there have been criteria that's already established by a leader or a decision maker, then we bring those in. And I also want to say, let's check these. This is what the criteria we're supposed to make the decision through, but what else are we considering? Because a leader, and I'm just making an assumption here, one type of leader might say the cost, expense, the ROI, and the time is the most important. And you might have an HR professional that says the values is the most important, and is this equitable? So you as a facilitator, you might have some other things in your head, or you might be talking to other people and then say, is there other criteria that we also want to consider? And you might have, here's the required criteria that's already established, and here's some of the other criteria that we feel makes it an even more powerful idea or project to work on.
Okay. So
Yeah.
what I'm hearing you say is that it needs to be pre-created in a way, because like if you're doing like if you do it like a mini summit or something like that, like you probably won't have time to come up with the criteria while you're in the summit. But like you can have like the core group, for example, like
Yes.
come up with the criteria. So like it can be representative, but like you don't do it during like the workshop time. You do it before somehow.
Yeah. And I think if you are working with a core team, this is a great place for them to come up with the criteria. And again, it all depends on the design. And we're going to talk more about that tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah. In some cases, you're like, okay, these are all great ideas, but they have to fit this one thing. It's got to fit our mission. I did this with a group a year ago, and their big issue was scope creep. That they were going outside of their mission and doing a whole bunch of things that weren't a part of their mission, but everybody on the team wanted to do it, so they did it. But they're like, hold on a second, these are all great ideas. It was an art organization, so of course everybody wanted to do their project. I was like, but it's so far from our mission, we can't get funding for any of these things now.
Yeah.
So in that case, it was like, we got to, no matter what we do, it's got to fit the mission. So in that case, it was very specific. It was one thing.
Specific.
Yeah.
Will you use the oh my God, I don't remember what it's called, but like the introductory paragraph from the interview guides? Will you like that paragraph that says like basically sets the interview guide if you're using an interview guide? I can't remember the name.
It's okay.
But anyway, will you use like that, for example, as the criteria?
You can. Okay.
I
think that's an excellent question. So this is where AI meets AI. And what does that mean? It means that in some cases, when we are doing a full summit where we're taking people through the process, I would absolutely use the interview guide, and I would use any training any materials that you got from the facilitator training. However, because I am a visual practitioner, I don't always get to be the lead facilitator. And so it's not always up to me how to design things. I'm there to support with visuals. So how can I do it almost a guerrilla style, not sneaky, but here's the value I bring. So when I meet with a client and they say, we're going to have this specific type of methodology and approach, and I'll ask questions like, is that really the question that we need to ask in order to have the conversation the client needs to have? And they go, what? And then I come up with an appreciative inquiry question and they go, oh, that's powerful, because we know it's powerful. And then here's the visual to back it up. So when I share with you my examples, my case studies for my practicum, you're like, whoa, this is like all over the place. This wasn't one thing. I didn't do one summit. That came years later because I wasn't the lead facilitator. So I put in, I add appreciative inquiry because that's my methodology, and I use visuals because that's the vehicle. So to me, it's that's how I blend those two. But yes, I say if you have a core team and you can do interviews, you're really making meaningful connections and relationships early on to define that desired outcome. Yeah.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not poo-pooing the process at all. I'm just saying we don't always have an opportunity to do the full AI 5D process. But this is where this particular visual, just this simple oval, 2 diagonal lines, 2 vertical lines, and then this line matches this. You saw me draw it so simply, how this can just be a very simple icon for taking lots of things, distilling it down into just a few things. Yeah. So what other questions do you have about this specific visual? Anything you'd like to add or? Because I've been talking about visuals and appreciative inquiry so much lately, I can't remember if yesterday did I talk about Sam Kainer and the way ideas, how meetings diverge and converge? Okay, I've literally repeated this probably 5 times this week, so that's why I can't remember if I said it yesterday. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to talk about that now, because I think this is an important piece. If for some reason you are in a meeting and it either goes off the rails, or if you're just like, I'm planning something, but I can't do the full AI process, I want to talk a little bit about Sam Kainer's work. And it's a visual, but it's a great way to see a meeting. And he has a book called Group Participatory Decision Making. Have either of you heard of that? Oh, you have. Okay. One of you have, one of you have. Okay. And this was the #1 book that my team, when we had a visual team, it was like the book we all had to read. And the thing is that a meeting begins and everyone comes into the meeting and they've got all of these ideas. They're like, actually, I'm going to draw that in black. Here they come with all their ideas. Everybody has their own agenda. They want to talk about their own thing. They might know the purpose of the meeting, but they still have something they want to talk about. And at this point in time, what's happening is the meeting is really diverging. There's a lot of different ideas being shared. But at some point, we talked about this both yesterday and today, what happens is that there are people who are done dreaming and they're ready to get things going. And we call that the groan zone. And this is if it's like a 3-day event, it usually happens on the 2nd day. People are like, okay, we know what we need to know. Let's get to work. And other people are like, no, let's keep thinking about it. We never get this time together. So what happens in the groan zone, one of the best things you can do is set your criteria and make decisions. That's how you get through the groan zone. And when that happens, when you set your criteria, and decide, okay, what ideas are actually going to get through. We talked about that criteria. Here's your criteria or your filters. And maybe you say, okay, now that we know the one, maybe 2 or 3 projects or ideas that we're going to be working on, get through, then we can focus on that one. And that's the thing that we can develop. Or if we're right on track, it's ready to ship. Like we could do the work in the meeting and be like, we're done. We could package it up, put a bow on it, send it off. And so at that point, you're converging. So every meeting that you have has a beginning or a start, the middle, and an end. And as a facilitator, you're kind of like the director of that story. You're helping the group set the tone, whether you're bringing in a guest speaker or a leader to set the tone. This is what we're going to talk about. Maybe you educate people a little bit. Maybe you need to push some information out, or you're gathering ideas, you're getting ideas. And then you're also helping them come to a place where they can come to consensus if that's important, or at least make a decision. Not everybody has to agree in some cases, in some situations, but sometimes you do want everyone to agree. And then there's the end. Now, it's not a beautiful process always. It's not 20 minutes of beginning, 20 minutes of middle, and 20 minutes of end. How many of you have had the end is like 3 minutes after the meeting is actually done, right? So the reason why I say this is because if you decide you want to do more visuals in a meeting, then especially if you're graphic recording, you kind of have to know the rhythm of how things work. And Sam Kainer's book has wonderful tips and tricks and methodology of how to get the whole group to participate. But he uses this, what's in blue, light blue here, he uses this graphic over and over and over again to show you where you are in the process. And so I bring that up because with visuals, people can get really excited about the process and lose track of time. And so that's important for you to manage those expectations and manage those exercises. So tomorrow when we get to design these things, we're going to look at agendas. And if you're anything like me, I pack way too much into a day and into a session. And so we're going to look at those and say, okay, how much and when do we do these things? When do we have divergent activities and visuals? When do we have where we're distilling down and making decisions? And then when are we doing some refining activities? And I've got visuals, like literally dozens of visuals for each one of these steps. So inside the meeting, you can kind of manage your time and exercises. And this is where you can ask me, how long will it take to have that conversation? Which was a great question you asked before when it came to the funnel is, you could spend an entire day just doing that exercise if you really want to explore the ideas, think about the criteria. But in some cases, you're like, we just have to come to a decision and make a recommendation, right? Don't have to be the ones that actually execute that. Yeah. So any questions about this particular visual or this process or this methodology? And if you have a different one, let me know. We can visualize that too.
I just have like here in Sweden, this model is, we talk about it a lot, but in my organization, I see very much so like we sort of, we don't stay in the grown zone. It's like the diverge and then poof, we go into convert, and we really very, very seldom we work through the grown zone, like really.
Yeah. Yeah. And how is that working for the organization? Does that work to work that way?
I think it creates some problems for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's sort of, so maybe my question would be like how to not like how to really not go from divert to convert, but really how can I support people like
Yeah.
to go like, and the managers when I do like when I do like workshops or days or stuff, I'm like the sidekick to the manager. So
Right.
yeah, and I'm really struggling with like really like we have to do this phase 2. We can't just poof. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Mm.
true. And so there's some certain tools that help people, and I can share those with you. I'm going to see if I can find it quickly so that you're not waiting on me. Um, here we go. Oops. What's really great is that if the organization knows about it, but doesn't always use it, it's great to bring it back up and say, look, there's actually, we might need to spend some extra time here. So I'm going to share with you if I can get, there we go. All right. So we love this work so much on my visual team. There was a visual team of 6 people that I helped build. And we loved this work so much that we created a framework that was based on it, but that we applied actual visuals too. And I'm going to show these to you. And then I'm also going to make these actual cards available to you because, again, these are more visuals that you can use and customize in your work. So this is just in my Dropbox. But so you'll see here we start with lots of different ideas. In the middle where the synthesis happens, we drew it as a lens because it's sort of like what's going to get through that lens or that filter. And then what are some models that we use to help people create that finished product or that final decision? And I'll share these with you. These are actual cards that we had printed up and that we gave out to other facilitators that wanted to train with us. And we literally write out, here's the concept, here's how to do this, and here's some variations that you, or ways that you might want to customize this. So that's just the framework. And you'll notice that they're color coded. We have methods, alternative, synthesis, and models. And I'm just going to cover one alternative. Actually, this is a principle. We talked about meeting principles yesterday, but I want to get right to where we have the synthesis happening. So these are all models. These are all, okay. Sorry, this is red. We're going to go to the red area. We have a lot of these cards. This is our own IP that we developed. So when we get to the point where we say, hold on a second, we're talking about it at this level, but it's going to happen at this level. Are we working at the right, are we having the conversation at the right level? So if your organization is having a really hard time, like we already made this decision, what, like maybe you made it too quickly, maybe talk about whatever you're working on at different levels of the organization. Is this going to work? So, and this has all the instructions here. One of my favorites, and it's a visual thing, you can do it online or in the room, is voting. And you can use fingers to vote. And you can have dot voting. But the whole idea of voting is people actually got to vote. And if people are visually, if people get to see each other vote and we have fingers all across the board, you're like, whoa, we are not in the same place at all. Like we need to have more discussion. If everybody's a big old 5 or a 0 or a 1, then it's pretty obvious. But if it's really mixed, we need to have more discussion about it. And that's a good visual way for everybody in the room to agree, you're right. We're making decisions too quickly. Let's see if there's another one. Here's a funnel. So we talked about the funnel, and this is another way to draw it from left to right. And what's great about that is above at the top, those are each criteria. And if you're working on a really big piece of paper that can stay up for a while, because we had one of these in our office where we were taking all of our ideas on what we were going to develop. And underneath, we actually wrote what are the resources that are going to be needed in order to pull this off. Right. So this is another thing that if you're saying, okay, let's take it through the funnel, but let's also talk about what's it going to take to make that happen. And that's it. So at the very end, the green part, you talked about, what does this look like? Is it like a graphic? Is it a video or whatever? In this particular thing, someone's interviewing someone else in the day of the life. And so it's just a visual saying, this is what this process looks like so that you can share it out. A great way to create that product is to create a micro video. If you did this in a room and you had a whole wall full of your process, then someone can take their camera and tell the story. And that you can use that to report out. Is that helpful, or does that create more questions? I hope this isn't too much of a fire hose, because this isn't. Yeah.
I love fire hose. Well, I have a lot to think about here. Lots of thoughts. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Good. Well, I will put this in the chat for now, and you can certainly download it and peruse these whenever you want to. And I'll also make sure that it's in the follow-up email. Just need to find my chat. And time really flies. So we're going to take a quick 5-minute break and then come back. And I want you to experience an appreciative resilience dreaming session for yourself. All right. So, one of the things that I'd like to introduce to you is a visual that I created out of my training through the Center for Appreciative Inquiry called Appreciative Resilience. And originally, I took this class because I just wanted to tech host for the teachers. And they said, "No, I think we've got it covered. I think you should take the class." And so I did, and it had a profound personal effect on me. And then I started to notice how I could customize this visual. It's called the Alive model. How I could customize it to serve as a needs assessment for individuals and how they can then use that in their organizations. And so Alive is an acronym that represents how we appreciate, love, inquire, venture, and evolve as human beings. And so, what I'm going to ask you to do is, I'm going to use the timers a lot, but I'm going to read some of these questions off to you, and I want you to really let's first get situated in our bodies. Let's really get focused on and present in where we are. So, I'm going to read off some questions, and I just want you to listen to them. And then one is probably going to speak to you. So if you want to write about it or think about it, I'd love for you to journal and write some things down. And then I'll give you some time to edit that and distill it down. So just free write. You're going to free write, and then you're going to have some time to reflect on that. And then I'd love for you to be able to share. But first, we want to get in our bodies. And I actually take people through this process. And I want you to feel comfortable in your chair. You can put your feet however feels most comfortable to you. It might be flat on the floor. I have mine on a little cushion. And I want you to notice the weight of your body being securely supported by your chair. And feel into your hips, your legs. Notice your breath. And if you need to help calm people down, a great exercise is however long you inhale, say to the count of 3 or 5, exhale longer by at least 2 counts. So if you inhale at 3, exhale at 5. And what that does is it slows down our heart rate, it slows everything down, it helps us become present. You can put your hands wherever they feel most comfortable. If you can have something in front of you to write on when we're finished here, that would be great. And actually going to change my camera here. Just notice your breath. Right. So you don't need to read these, but you can if you want to. Do you see the questions on the screen? Great. So what I'd like you to do is whatever question I ask you, just hang with that one, and then you can begin writing. I'll give you some time after I read the questions to write. So think about what you need in order to feel that your ideas are valued and appreciated. What do you need in order to feel that your ideas are valued and appreciated? And what do you need in order to feel your learning process in this class is supported and cared for? So, with regards to your needs, in order to feel that your learning process is supported and cared for. And when you think of these needs, notice what's coming up for you. Emotionally, could be physical. What questions can you ask to get the clarity that you need? So, if that's an uncomfortable feeling or an I'm not sure feeling, what might be a question that will help bring you clarity? And if you get stuck in this process, even if it gets really, really hard, what can you do to brave the storm? What will you do? What strengths will you pull from in order to get you back on track? So, really, this is about if you get stuck, what resources do you have that will help you brave the storm? And what do you need to inspire you to expand and be open to new possibilities? So, if you're past that stuck phase, what could you do or what do you need to inspire you to expand and be open to possibilities? So, the questions are on the screen. Let's take the next 5 minutes to just free write, and then I'll give you time afterwards to distill it down so you can share out. But for now, just free write to as many questions as you want to answer. It can be one, it could be all five. So let's take 5 minutes to do that.